oh, this is cool.
Here's time for the Ed Tate stare. Just look at the audience.
The power stare.
And Ed is so ready with a catalog of questions for Aaron. I can see him right here. So
Actually,
Well, how you feeling, first of all?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good. I have to admit that this is a great feeling. The interesting thing is that somebody asked me, hell, did you have a good night's sleep? I said, no, I actually had a nightmare that I didn't place in the semifinals and I had to do the whole thing over again.
And just so a lot of people don't know, and we're curious of the new process, what did they do media-wise between when you left the stage and doing the pictures? Did they get you on any interviews or?
We just did a quick interview and then they took us right out into the showcase to take pictures. Mm-hmm. The interviews, I've been told, will come later as they get more requests from media.
Cool.
Aaron, let me ask a question. Because I had the privilege last night at the dinner to sit at the table and watch people come and interrupt his meal. And I'm thinking,
Did you finish your dinner?
I did.
But no one here saw this. At one point, at our table, it was a quiet table, and
It really wasn't. 'Cause they kept asking me questions.
well, I only asked him 5. But he got to finish his meal, and at one point, Aaron, with his back to the dance floor, leaned back, and he was like this. I said, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. Tell us, what was going through your mind in that moment? I saw people come by, ask you, come to my district, and at one point he said, I'm being overwhelmed right now with several requests. I'll have to get back to you later. But what was going through your mind? You had your head back. I thought, he's freaking out on me. Well, what's happening? What's going through your head?
At that point, I think that's when it officially sunk in that I had become the world champion.
And be careful what you wish for.
But it's been a very long journey for me. I started competing in 2012, and I started off with a speech that I knew for a fact was going to win the world championship of public speaking. It was the best speech that had ever been written.
I felt that way until I met him.
So you can imagine my surprise when it did not win at the area level.
Ooh.
And I think I only got out of my club because I was the only person that competed. But I was going off of talent. I came into the door and people saw my icebreaker speech and said, oh, you're really good. And I let that go to my head a bit and kept giving speeches and people kept loving it. And then I did the contest. Then my world was rocked. It was somebody who came to me after that. And the first question he asked me is, do you want to know why you lost? And after you have not won a contest, the last thing you want to hear from anybody is, do you want to know why you lost? Before he even mentions his name. But he told me that you just preached to us. There was no story. You had all sizzle, no steak. And
Write that one down.
the thing is, I came into Toastmasters. I came into the door with a great mentor. Dilip Abisekar is the person who introduced me to Toastmasters. He was actually a faculty member at the college I attended. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for him, I would have never known about Toastmasters. I never used him the best way that I could until that time where I was told that I needed to work on my story. So I went to him, and he helped me with the foundations of telling a proper story. He helped me with the structure of a speech, and I've been running with his fundamentals ever since 2013. So 2012, I placed second in the area. Then in 2013 was the year I made it to the semifinals for the first time. So I forgot what the original question was.
The question was...
Nobody cares.
The question was, what was the... I mean, I watched you lean back, head in hands, to the heavens, and I thought, this dude is freaking out. So can you recall at that moment, what was going through your head and your heart? What were you seeing? What were you seeing for the future? I mean...
At that moment, I was just enjoying life. It had officially sunk in that I had become the world champion, that I had achieved that goal after all those years of work. and I was just enjoying it.
Well, one quick follow-up question to that. So we go back to, it's now 3 p.m. yesterday. You're at the step and repeat. You're smiling and shaking hands and doing photographs. I went to my room, got something done. I came back. You were still there. Tell us about that experience. It's the first time everyone's there, and you spent 2+ hours doing photographs.
Yep. So the good thing is that I had practice with that in 2016. 2016, Josephine Lee and I, we came out for pictures first while Darren Tate did his interviews. We stayed out in line for about an hour with people taking pictures with us. And once Darren came, nobody cared about us, so we decided to
Ed calls it windburn. when they blow by us, they go right to the reigning world champion.
That's actually Craig's. That's actually Craig's.
Is it Craig?
Yeah.
You don't want a picture?
But we started walking to get something to eat because the championship had been in the morning. We hadn't eaten breakfast.
Right.
So we're walking in the hall, and a friend of mine stops and says, "Oh, let's just take a quick picture." And I didn't feel good about that because I said, if we take a picture, we're going to be here taking pictures for a long time. She said, no, it'll be quick. It'll be quick. 2 hours later, we're still taking pictures. So I had experience with smiling a lot. I know how to smile so that my cheeks don't get stiff and sore.
You've been to Asia, huh?
Yep. Then it was, I had practiced. I knew what to expect. So I was expecting that already. So I didn't have a problem with that. We actually did pretty good. And they actually didn't care. They didn't allow Kwong and Louisa to leave, which was good because people wanted to take pictures with them, which allowed me to get a break.
Well, the other thing I want to point out in 2016, it was the first time that a second place and a third place finisher had been treated like a world champion. And what I mean by that is you guys got as many district invitations as any other world champion. So, like, in my opinion, you were the people's champ, and you just officially collected your trophy yesterday.
So what's the lesson you learned this year?
The lesson,
2016.
the lesson that I learned this year, well, there were two really. One, that my process does work. As Ed said, there's a point where you have to stop taking input and say, okay, I have to do this. And for me, I had taken so much information and collected so much information from before. I had studied other speakers, and I said, okay, now I need to know who I am and say this speech in my voice. But at the same time, the other lesson is you always need an overall goal. And my goal this year was not to win the world championship. I always had to ground myself in my goal. My goal was to do better than I did in 2016. Similar to Kwong, I'm as much as people love my 2016 speech, I did not feel that I did my best in 2016. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel that I did my stories justice. I didn't give them the justice that they deserved because my mentality was around judging rather than the message. I fumbled in 2016, and when I did that, my mind immediately went to, oh, wait, did the judges catch that? Which totally put me out of the right mindset. And there is one story that I absolutely loved in 2016, a story of a girl named Michelle who was terrified of speaking in public. And when she got in front of the crowd for table topics, she froze. And everybody's thinking that, oh, it's because she's scared. But no, she was remembering a few words where her mother said that she believed in her. The only words she spoke, and she sat down. That was the best story that I believe I had in my arsenal, and I did not give it the justice that it deserved. And it burned me for the past 3 years. So this year, I wanted to get on stage. I didn't care if I placed first, second, or third because that was out of my control. I had control over one thing, beating my prior self. And there were times in yesterday's speech where I fumbled, but I just powered through. And it's because I was stronger mentally. And at no point did I think about any judging. It was just, I'm telling this story and I'm giving my message.
Well, I want to ask one thing and back away, let Lance and Ed speak. To piggyback on a question for Kwong, you were second in the world in 2016. Here we are 3 years later. What happened in between that might be of interest to everyone here and those watching as well? Did you compete or did you not? How did that?
I did. I've competed every year since 2012. In 2017, that is when I first made the goal that I wanted to get better with my execution. I wanted to give a speech the way that I wanted it to be delivered, the way that it was meant to be delivered. In 2017, I was the #1 loser, so I was coming in and everybody was, oh, wow, it's going to be him, it's going to be him. But I didn't place in that semifinals in 2017, but I was content because I gave that speech the way that it was meant to be given. There was nothing more that I could have done for that speech at that time. Everything else was out of my control.
Okay.
You're backstage just before your speech. What are you thinking, feeling, and how do you cope with that? Because we all get nervous 5 minutes before.
So 5 minutes before, right before the speech, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just listening to music. And I'm literally just dancing in my chair, listening to music. I decided I wasn't going to listen to any other speech. I was just had my headphones in, so once they announced Kwong, I said, okay, let me play this song.
So you're saying you did not hear speaker any other 5 speakers?
I did not hear any of the 5
to
other
this
speakers.
point. Okay.
But yeah, I'm just listening and just enjoying the music. I'm not thinking anything at that point.
Great strategy. I did the same thing.
Really?
I did not hear any of the competitors' speeches until like 2 or 3 years later. That was my entire process throughout the entire competition. I called up Toastmasters International and says, do I have to listen to the other competitors? They said, no, you just have to be in the room when it's your turn. I said, cool. And I never heard or listened to the other competitors' speeches.
Now, just on the flip side, I watch every speech. I want to know what I'm up against. I stand at the back of the room. I don't sit up in front. I'm wanting to see, are they filling the room? I'm watching how their speeches are going because I want to know how much more effort, if they're going to run a 7-minute 40, I know I got to do a 6.9. I want to see what I'm up against. So that was my strategy. Now, he won it in the first year, but he was speaking until he lost. He was trying to lose the thing, which is a reverse point. And a lot of times when I make this point, people tell me they get a really severe ringing in their ears. I don't know if that's happening. I don't hear it, but people tell me that they do. So if you heard that, I apologize. It happens every time.
I kind of had.
They have going on back there, man.
I had both experiences where at the World Championship, I listened to Larry Land, he was the contestant before me, and he got so many laughs. And I really started being deflated because he was so funny because there's that misperception, humor wins. And then last year we saw Sherry Sue had more laughs, bigger laughs than Ramona, but Ramona won, which she should have. But don't think that humor is a thing. But I started like losing a little bit in my mind. I'm like, he has more laughs than me. And then I hear Mark Brown, Dotton, you have the privilege of 7 minutes of 2,000 lives. What will you do with that? and I had to build myself back up. Now, in my semifinals speech, then it was called regionals. I listened to every other, and I was the last speaker. And as everyone went up, I was like, well, that was average. Well, that was average. Well, that was average. And inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a shot at this. Not like I knew I would win, but I was kind of unimpressed with the other ones. But that could have worked the exact opposite if like Aaron Beverly or Lance was there or something like that. So you got to just know what works for you. And if you are insecure, don't listen to the other speeches. Anyway, it's a personal choice.
But that's exactly why I didn't want to listen to any of the other speeches, because one of my other goals was to avoid contest mode and have fun with it. So if I listen to the other speeches, I'm going to be judging the other speeches.
Yeah.
And if I hear a good speech, had I heard Kwong first, I'm like, oh man, we're talking about a similar topic, about acceptance and helping people despite race and culture. Ah man, why? That would have been my mindset, and it would have totally taken me out of the mindset that I should have been in. So that's the reason why I didn't want to listen. I wanted to get out of contest mode. I didn't want to judge anybody. It was going to be a total surprise for me.
Nice. Good mindset.
just based on my experience, the year I won my district speech, and this is why I want to listen to the speeches from that standpoint, just to talk about that for a second. If a speaker talks about one of your subjects, if you're going to be a great speaker, you have to adjust your speech because they just took your line. And if you stand up and say it, they go, that was just what the other guy said. So I want to know if somebody touched on my subject. Now, just to let you know, in the district speech, 2005, my district speech was called Dorothy Got It Right. And it was using the Wizard of Oz as a template for success in life. I was the first speaker. Nobody in my competition had anything about the Wizard of Oz, and I learned the importance of unique topics. No, the keynote speaker, who was a double kidney transplant survivor, been on dialysis her entire life, was speaking an hour before the competition with no break, had a topic called Follow the Yellow Brick Road with stick figures of the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and how the Wizard of Oz got her through her whole life. And I had to listen to that speech knowing my speech was about the Wizard of Oz. I would lose that audience as soon as I said, I turned the TV on, my favorite movie is on the Wizard of Oz. And they would all go either like, oh my God, or they go, oh, that poor man. So I had to adjust my speech. And that's why I always want to listen. But you're right, you have to do what's right. Now I want to come back around and ask you a question because your focus. What was the selection process you had for picking that particular speech? And that was a story that happened this last year?
Yep, 2018.
Okay. What was, because we all go through this. I used to all year long I would be looking for my international speech and then January would come around and I'd have to pull it out of my pocket because it wasn't out there. If I found the topic in September, I was like, I've got it. I've got the speech that will win the world championship, which I never did. But how did you pick it? What was your connection to it? What was your purpose for delivering that? What was you felt the value was there?
When the year started, when the contest season started, I had a theme that I wanted to go on, and the theme was unity this entire year. And I said both of my speeches were going to be about unity. There was another potential speech that I was thinking about giving way back in March, but I said, that's not unity. It's not talking about something that I really think needs to be shared right now, especially with just the climate of, But the speech itself was a Facebook post that I had posted not too long after that wedding, and I saw the reaction that it got from Facebook. And I thought, you know what, maybe I can try to make this into a speech. And I started working on it back then. I had the chance to go to District 92, which is in India, and I included that story, the longer version of that story, in my keynote. And it worked for them. And I measured their laughter, I measured their cheers, I measured their reactions. And I said, okay, this could possibly work. Now, the problem is it's a very long story. It has a lot of different characters. How can I condense this now into a 5 to 7 minute speech? So to answer the question, I had pretty much decided that it was going to be that speech at the beginning of the year. There was one possibility, but I said, no, that's not the theme that I'm going on this year.
Okay. And just to follow up, how much did it change?
So it changed most from the consolidation of characters. In the original story, there's about 10 different characters. So the ominous smiler is actually combined of, it's a combination of 4 different people. Even me as a character in my story is a combination of 2 characters. I was not the only person protecting the shoes. There was another person protecting them with me. But at that point, when I had him in the story, at that point there were about 10 different characters in that story. I said, this is going to be too much. Too many people to remember.
And unique names.
Yes, and unique names, which actually the reason why I say the ominous smiler, I don't use names, because in 2016, I have the Bus Lady of Doom. I think it's easier for an audience to remember a trait of a character as the name, rather than saying that, oh, the Bus Lady Mary. Like, okay, Mary. But Bus Lady of Doom, you know that she's a bus lady, and you know that she's probably not the nicest person in the world.
Ed Tate, real quick, Ed Tate calls it create an adjective name. Because in his championship speech, he used average Joe, officer friendly, strictly business. And so it's a great way, especially if you're telling a story of somebody who you don't, like a family member, and you don't want to use their name. It's another way to do that, but brilliantly done.
Thank you.
And just on that, a point, we were talking about this last night. You have 7 minutes, and a lot of times the story you're telling is a 2-hour story. And when we were at dinner last night, I was saying I give a tremendous amount of creative, creative ability to the speaker to craft the story so it works in the time frame. And a lot of times you're not putting your hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth when you stand up in front of a group of people. You have 7 minutes to impact them. The thing I look for is that the honesty and the integrity of the story is held. I don't like people standing up and saying they were wrongly incarcerated for murder for 15 years and tell a story that didn't happen. I've heard stories, we're talking, a semifinal, a guy talks about a horrible divorce, and then the final speech, he talks about what a wonderful wife he has. And it wasn't wife number 2. And it was just like, what's going on here? People sometimes try to create things, but you have to take it. I had over 20 minutes of material. I had to condense down to 6 minutes and 15 seconds. And it's like picking your favorite child a lot of times. You got to take something out, and you love that thing, but you got to figure out what thing is going to move it forward. So condensing that down so it works, so the audience can understand it, and you're not going to confuse them.
Yep.
So it's
Write
something
this
we'll all
down.
go through there.
How do I say it better in fewer words?
Yeah.
How do I say it better in fewer words? So the original speech I gave to Mark was 1,492 words. I had to get it down to 750. But I didn't want to just throw things out. I wanted to make sure I was condensing the story. Those of you who are our age or older, you may know the screenplay The Odd Couple, which got turned into a TV show. Well, Neil Simon, when he was writing it, he wrote it on his own experience, but there are actually 3 roommates. And he took the characteristics of one of the roommates and divided them into the other 2 to make it more interesting, the odd couple, rather than the odd thruple. What is it? Quadruple? Triple.
Triad.
So, but that's a great example. It's a huge story, but how do I say it? So you got to sometimes combine characters, and then write this down: the emotional truth. Aaron told the emotional truth of the story. You're just condensing it so the audience takes it away. You might have heard Patricia Fripp talk about Alfred Hitchcock. He says all Hollywood does is take real life and pulls out the boring parts. That's what we're talking about, condensing.
Well, it goes back to Kwang's point. I know the final destination. Your final destination was unity. That was the final destination. How do I get there? How do I simplify this story for the audience so that they can follow, so we can arrive there together?
All right, here's the most important question, Aaron. How's your mom doing?
Got a story about his mom.
So my mom, the first thing she said to me after we got to my room, she said, "Great, I don't have to do any more speech contests."
Transparency.
Yeah, Mom.
But no, she is extremely happy, extremely proud, and yeah.
She should be.
Well, his mom introduced herself at the conference, and she says, "Hello, I'm Beverly's mom." And the first thing she says to me is, "Are you coaching anyone this year?" And I said, well, no. And she says, "Well, good." Because like the kid I coached in 2016 beat his kid. So she was quite happy with it.
The other thing, Jim Key was talking to his mom, and he shared the story last night. He goes, the funniest thing, he goes, Aaron's going to be being asked for an autograph a lot. And he goes, it was really odd. The first person, and Jim said, to ask him for an autograph was his mother. And he said it was really weird, but it was sort of neat. And he gave his mother his autograph. And your mom said, "Yeah, I want his autograph on a check."
Real quick, I want to go back to the comment, your story about going to India and testing the story there.
Yep.
I think it was Craig Valentine who said, your audience helps you to write your speech. He said he measured their reaction, their laughter, and he was in a culture talking about them, so you knew you wanted to see how sensitive they were.
Yep.
And that's why we always talk about testing material in different ways, because your audience will help you to hone and write your speech. And wherever I go, I talk about this concept regarding condensation, not liquid and gas, but when I was in school in Kingston, Jamaica, way back in high school, we had a subject called précis. It's a French word, Precis. I'm sure that Carol knows all about that. Can you share, do you teach this? Did you teach this at all or no? Yes, précis. Do you teach that?
No, I teach speaking.
Okay, but what is précis as far as you know it?
Précis is when you take a subject, a story, an article,
Maureen.
and you condense it, keeping just the gist, the essential points.
That was a high school subject for me in the mid-1970s, where you have to take this subject and condense it down, not lose the essence, but keep it as powerful and as strong as possible. So I think for me, that has helped me over the last several years in my coaching, working with Darren and his speech, because I was taught that there's a way to actually do it. Now, there may be précis courses online, I don't know. But if you're serious about speaking, I recommend you think about looking at a précis course, Precis, nice French word, but check it out because it really can teach you how do I take this and not lose all this great material, condense it down, and still be tight and strong. Why use 12 words when you can use 4? Précis can teach you that. Any other comment on that, Carol? No?
No, you're absolutely right.
Merci beaucoup.
The French word,
It's a French word.
the same as the English word. Précis, precise.
Yeah.
And that's how I discovered dialogue, the power of dialogue. That's the big aha I get from Mark, is I could say more in fewer words when I had a character speak and had emotion behind it. I didn't have to use the words. And then he enthusiastically said. I could just get rid of those and say it enthusiastically. I just had to communicate clearly to the audience that I was now in character, which where the idea of holograms came through. I also want to emphasize what both Ed and Aaron said, that he told the story on Facebook. Like, that is a great testing area. At your Toastmaster Club, yes. Whether it's you just speaking a video, speaking into Facebook Live or recorded video, and see what you get for comments. When the book that I'm writing now, I'm actually, each week I send out an article to my newsletter list, and I want to see how many comments, because I know it's 4, 4, 4, 12. I know that one hit a chord. So look at your Facebook post, whether you write out the story like he did or video and tell the story, but then see the reaction you got. Now, you don't give up on it right away, but you're listening like Ed did. What are they commenting on? Or where's the audible, ooh, like that means that's good. Keep it, expand on that.
And the only time I don't recommend précis is if you want to use a 57-word speech title.
For those of you who have not been around 2016, he had the longest title, Genius, in the history of Toastmasters. Just for people who haven't seen it, a little quick story behind that, or what was the title?
He doesn't remember it.
The title is
Don't be the.
Leave a lasting memory using as few words as possible and strive with every fiber of your being to avoid being the type of person who rambles on and on with no end in sight, more likely than not causing most listeners to sit and think to themselves, oh my goodness, can somebody please make this stop? Which had to be recited
Aaron
twice.
Beverly. Aaron Beverly, and then they had to say it again.
Yeah.
You were in the audience.
And the audience
Lost
roared.
it.
I've apologized to Balraj several times since.
Now I teach a lesson from this too, that was a great example of that. Originally you got the idea from Andy Dooley.
Yes.
Did you see him walking around, by the way?
Oh,
He
I
was
did not.
here. He was here visiting. So just tell the story how you did it wrong and then you changed it to do it right, because I think this is so important.
So yeah, I originally got the idea from Andy Dooley. He was one of the first YouTubers or the first Toastmasters that I saw on YouTube, and I saw his speech. His speech title at the time was about 30-something words. And I said, oh, that's really cool. I want to use that in my speech. So in 2013, I started writing a draft of a speech, and it had a really long title. People absolutely hated it. They said, oh, the title makes no sense. It's just a gimmick. Over the years, I realized how right they were. But the reason why the title worked in 2016 was because I made sure that it wasn't an empty gimmick. It was still a gimmick, but it wasn't an empty gimmick. The only reason why it worked was because of the line that I said a few lines after. Just because you say more doesn't mean people will remember what you say. So I took that title and made it a point in my speech, and that's the only reason why it worked.
Let me comment on that, because what that did, and this is one thing to keep in mind, a lot of times we get sort of focused on what is normal and accepted, and I have to be normal and accepted. And I have to do what everybody does. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and anyone, whoever. All right? And I did this last year, I did this World Champion Speaker Summit where I interviewed all but 2 of the existing world champions. And Michael Ahn, who's the 1978 world champion of public speaking, believe it or not, he was the first contestant to walk out behind the lectern. Now, can you imagine a competition where everybody stood behind the lectern? And he walked out behind the lectern, and everybody, your mouth's wide open. Everybody in the audience was going, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be behind the lectern." No, he broke the mold. He did something different. Darren LaCroix fell on his face, and I've talked about this, and we talked about this weekend, but he was making a message. Because I was in the 4th row in the audience going, "You're down too long, dude. You're down. Get up, get up." And then he stood up, and what did he say? "Did you think I stayed down too long? Yes, you did. Have you ever stayed down too long?" It was like a double mule kick in the chest. I was like, I couldn't listen to the rest of the speech. I was like, oh my God, I've been down for... And so the point is, it's a gimmick, but it's got to work. It's got to drive your message. And what Aaron did with that speech title is he did something that nobody else did, and he broke the mold, but it wasn't a gimmick. It forwarded his message.
So, I'll just let me interject there. The thing with that title, the reason why I wanted to do it, I always consider myself a contrarian. So if somebody says that, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," people say yes, and I say why. So I read this book called How to Win the World Championship of Public Speaking, and it talked about Andy Dooley and how he used a long title and said, "You cannot win, or you should not compete with a long title because nobody will remember it." I said, "Challenge accepted." But the thought process was that your titles have to be short and memorable. My thought was, it can still be memorable and something different. I pride myself on being different. That's why I walked out yesterday in a kurta, because it was different. And again, that's a gimmick, but it was on the verge of an empty gimmick. But I feel that me being dressed in their attire helped strengthen that speech.
Absolutely.
Helped strengthen
It was not
that
empty.
message.
No, it wasn't empty.
It was totally valid.
No,
It was totally
during
valid.
your whole speech, I saw you in India with what you
Yeah,
were doing.
totally
I thought it
valid.
was completely appropriate.
valid.
I don't think, I disagree with you all. It's not a gimmick. I think it's a risk. Darren took a risk. Every person up here who won the World Championship of Public Speaking, we all took a risk. I did audience participation. And 95% of well-meaning, good-intentioned Toastmasters told me not to do it. What did the world champions say? That's a winner. Okay? Here's something else that Aaron did that's actually kind of different as well. Aaron changed the angle in which we see a speaker. So for when Darren was laying on the floor, we saw a speaker on the ground. When we saw Jim Key standing on chairs, we saw a speaker from above. Let's see, Rory Vaden, he turned his back. He turned his back. You know. But how did he change his angle? Right here. He gave us a different angle. You gave us something unique. You gave us something different. Take risks. Take chances. Stop playing it safe. Okay? Playing it safe, guess what? You don't win. You got to take a chance.
All right.
Let me throw in just, this is something I talk about. I changed the ending to my speech at the end of the third speaker in the finals. Okay, because I'm sitting there, I wanted my audience to accept my message, and my ending had gone, this is the ultimate question, but that's not what's important. What's important is your answer. It was sort of blasé. And that's when I got the audience participation where I said, can you cha-chink? And I got everybody to chink with me, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, I want them to accept this message, but here was my viewpoint. If I'm going to fail, I'm failing falling off the front of the stage trying too hard. I'm not failing falling off the back of the stage playing it safe. Okay, and it's like I know in anything in my life where it was competitive, where I had to push myself to achieve something, it took that extra 0.1% of effort that put me over the line to do that, and to keep the focus on that. I mean, like that, it was like, no, I'm going right up the front of that stage. If I fall there, I'm landing in the audience. I'm not falling off the back, going behind the curtains, and I didn't know where it went. So.
Two points to back that up. Understand, we're talking about the contest as a metaphor. Two things. If you want to care about your audience, you got to be unforgettable. Because as soon as you walk off stage, there's another speaker, there's friends, there's calls, there's challenges in their home life. So you've got to be unforgettable for your audience. If you want to do this professionally, you've got to stand out from other speakers. Like Sarah has a great message that she's figuring out because she wants to help young girl. Her daughter was bullied. She wants to help young girls and their moms cope with being bullied. Like you got to find ways to stand out because your message and your story matters. All right, Aaron, final bit of advice, final thoughts?
Leave a lasting legacy.
It's failed. Didn't work. Oh, man.
I would say that persistence. It's persistence. And not only persistence, but consistency, persistency, and quality. You have to keep all three. This contest is not easy. And Kwong has been the personification of all three of those. I told him yesterday, so I said I started competing in 2012. The speech that inspired me to start competing was Fortune Cookie.
So you caused it. Your fault. That's what you get for inspiring.
But you just work on yourself. Every year I've competed in this contest, I've gotten better. It's really the best part about this contest is the growth that you experience. And I've grown every single year. That's why I competed every year. The one year that I said I wasn't going to compete, that was in 2017, I believe. I went by the club contest time, the area contest time, and I absolutely regretted it. But then there were some gray areas in the rules, and my club actually didn't hold an official contest. They just elected a winner. Yeah. So my first round in 2017 was division. Wow. Because the person who was elected said, oh, I can't make it. Hey, do you want to compete? I said, sure. And because I had regretted it so much that I did not compete in 2017. But compete, grow. Whether you win or not, whether you win a trophy or not, you will still win if you grow.
Well, you're about to have a privilege of many stages around the world, and that's one of the things we love about you two guys is who you are, the person you are. So just remember, you're given a huge privilege.
Question at the back?
I just wanted to ask, what was your preparation? What were you doing 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago? How were you preparing for this? The hours you were putting in?
1 week ago, this speech was locked. I was not taking any feedback. People came up to me and say, hey, you want to run your speech? I mean, no. Nope. Because even if I didn't take their feedback, I would change my speech based on their reactions. And I said, this is locked. Even I'm not changing it. They say, Jaron says that you're the CEO of your speech. I always say that I am the judge, jury, and if need be, the executioner. Everybody else is a lawyer trying to present their case. But even then, I said, nobody is making changes to the speech, not even me.
But that's the ownership. That's what we talk. That's the ownership, which that came across in your delivery. You owned that speech when you're on stage, and that's the ownership we look for.
Yep.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, Suzanne.
All right. What, did you have a question? Sorry. Yes. All right. Last question, because because people have to leave. One question. We're going to debrief all of the different speeches, and you're free to stay or go if you'd like. Yes. Final question.
You took your speech to India to test it. Did you test it out in any North American market in front of people who may have been in a similar situation? I personally experienced a Hindu, Chinese, North American, Canadian type of wedding. So I was one of those bridesmaids one time. So I was living that through you? Did you test it in any other?
Oh, absolutely. This year was the most that I've ever tested out a speech. So in 2016, I probably visited 3 clubs before giving that speech on the world stage. This time, it was definitely over 10. But most of them were in North America, and I just used their feedback. Their feedback was critical in me getting this speech to where it was. I actually hate feedback. I despise it because I've been working on this for so long, and how dare you not tell me that this speech is not perfect in the But the feedback that I've received from people, I'll just say there were 2 people who were Indian when I was giving it in North America, and they decided to stand up and tell people about the reason for the game. So this was before I included the context of the game in the speech. So they actually got up and explained it, and I started thinking to myself, well, they think that they need to stand up and explain this ritual and the purpose of it. So let me include that in my message now and tell people the context behind the game.
That was good.
But that was a pivot.
Yeah.
And that was also, I wrote down that you had 5 setups for 5 payoffs, and that was one of them. And that was a payoff, but that wasn't the real purpose of the story. You know, because you said number 1, I say it's like it was a false. Well, it wasn't false, but it led the audience to think that, oh, that's the purpose of the speech, is like, you know, hey, so that the families can get together.
Right.
But no, you know, you had something more, you know, and that was the surprise that we talked about.
Yeah.
So if you see the value in world-class feedback like that, you will love Stage Time University. If you're an experienced presenter, sometimes we're wondering, what's that little technique or that idea that I've been doing this for a while, but what do I need? We've designed Stage Time so you get world-class processes that you can take with you every time you take the stage, and we give you an opportunity to get world-class feedback on our live weekly calls. So check out Stage Time University, dive right in, become a member of Stage Time University, where we help you become unforgettable.